Al-Farabi, the second teacher after Aristotle. Abu Nasr Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Farabi, a towering intellect of the 9th and 10th centuries, is justly celebrated as the second teacher, al-Muallim al-Thani, a title placing him in the highest echelon of philosophical tradition, second only to Aristotle himself, the first teacher. Born in the region of Farab in present-day Kazakhstan, Al-Farabi migrated to Baghdad, the bustling intellectual heart of the Abbasid Caliphate, where he absorbed and synthesized the vast philosophical heritage of antiquity. His genius was not merely in preserving Greek thought, but in systematically organizing it and integrating it with Islamic theology, thereby laying the groundwork for all subsequent Islamic philosophy. Al-Farabi's profound engagement with the works of Aristotle was the cornerstone of his intellectual project. He meticulously studied, commented on, and organized Aristotle's Organon, the collection of works on logic, making this complex system of thought accessible to a new generation of Arabic-speaking scholars. His commentaries were so insightful and his grasp of Aristotelian logic so complete that he was able to clarify and extend the master's ideas. This is why the title second teacher is so fitting. He was the primary conduit and interpreter of Aristotle for the Islamic world, and subsequently for medieval Europe. However, Al-Farabi was not a mere imitator. He was a creative thinker who, while deeply rooted in the Aristotelian tradition, also drew heavily from Platonic and Neoplatonic thought, particularly their political and metaphysical systems. He saw these as complementary, not contradictory, and his unique synthesis created a philosophical system that was both comprehensive and uniquely Islamic. His works provided a systematic philosophical framework that could address the profound questions of existence, knowledge, and society, all while remaining within the bounds of Islamic belief. Ideal society in Al-Farabi's political philosophy. Al-Farabi's political philosophy, articulated most famously in his work Al-Madina al-Fadila, The Virtuous City, is a bold and enduring vision of an ideal society. Drawing inspiration from Plato's Republic, Al-Farabi constructs a detailed model of a virtuous city, but adapts it to the monotheistic and spiritual context of Islam. For Al-Farabi, the purpose of human existence is to attain true happiness, sa'ada, which he defines not as fleeting pleasure or material wealth, but as the perfection of the human soul through the acquisition of knowledge and the practice of virtue. This ultimate goal, he argues, cannot be achieved by an individual in isolation. It requires a community, a society, and ultimately a state that is organized to facilitate this pursuit for all its citizens. The virtuous city is, therefore, a society where its inhabitants cooperate to achieve this collective happiness. Al-Farabi compares this society to a healthy human body, where each organ and limb works in harmony under the direction of the heart. In the virtuous city, a similar hierarchy exists. The leader of this city is akin to the heart, a wise and virtuous ruler who directs the city's various parts towards their proper functions and, ultimately, towards the common good. Al-Farabi meticulously outlines the characteristics of this ideal society, distinguishing it from ignorant cities, which are ruled by greed, honor, or necessity, and whose citizens are concerned only with their own selfish desires.
The virtuous city, in contrast, is guided by shared moral and intellectual principles, and its laws and customs are all aimed at helping its citizens live virtuous lives and achieve their ultimate purpose. This concept was a cornerstone of Islamic political thought and provided a powerful intellectual justification for a form of governance that prioritizes the moral and intellectual well-being of its people. Music and metaphysics, the dual genius of Al-Farabi. Al-Farabi's intellectual pursuits were not confined to the traditional boundaries of philosophy. He was also a preeminent theorist of music, and his work in this field showcases the remarkable breadth of his genius. His magnum opus on the subject, Kitab al-Musika al-Kabir, the Great Book of Music, is a monumental work that not only codified the music theory of his time, but also delved into the profound metaphysical and aesthetic dimensions of sound. Al-Farabi treated music as a rigorous science, applying mathematical and logical principles to analyze its structure, intervals, and harmony. He systematized the study of musical scales and rhythm, providing a theoretical foundation that influenced musicology for centuries, both in the Islamic world and in medieval Europe. However, Al-Farabi's interest in music went far beyond its technical aspects. He saw a deep connection between the structure of music and the structure of the cosmos. Drawing from Pythagorean and Neoplatonic ideas, he believed that music was a reflection of the underlying order and harmony of the universe. The principles of harmony, proportion, and rhythm found in music were, for him, a sensory manifestation of the same mathematical and metaphysical principles that governed the movements of the celestial spheres. In this way, music was not merely an art form for entertainment, but a profound tool for understanding the cosmos and for purifying the human soul. He believed that certain musical modes and melodies could influence the emotions and moral character of a person, a concept that was central to his ethical philosophy. Thus, for Al-Farabi, the study of music was a pathway to metaphysics, a way to connect the sensory world to the intelligible world, and to experience the divine harmony that pervades all of creation.
Reason and revelation in Al-Farabi's thought. One of the most pressing intellectual challenges of the early Islamic period was the relationship between reason, aql, and revelation, wahi. For Al-Farabi, this was not a conflict, but a question of harmony and a clear division of labor. He developed a sophisticated philosophical system to demonstrate that the truths revealed through prophecy were the same truths that a philosopher could arrive at through the rigorous use of reason. He argued that the divine truth, which is one and eternal, can be communicated in two distinct ways. The philosopher, through intellectual contemplation and logical demonstration, grasps these truths in their pure, abstract, and universal form. This path is accessible only to a select few who have the intellectual capacity and discipline to pursue it. The prophet, on the other hand, receives this same divine truth through a different channel. The prophet's intellect is so perfect and his imaginative faculty so strong that he is able to receive knowledge from the active intellect the last of the celestial intelligences in Al-Farabi's Neoplatonic cosmology, and translate it into a symbolic, metaphorical, and highly motivational language. This language of revelation, the stories, laws, and images of religion, is accessible to the general populace, who may not have the intellectual capacity for philosophical abstraction. Thus, religion serves a crucial social and political function by communicating the same ethical and metaphysical truths that philosophy discovers, but in a form that inspires and guides the entire community. Al-Farabi's model of reason and revelation was not one of antagonism, but of complementarity, with both serving to lead humanity toward the same ultimate goal of knowledge and perfection. Al-Farabi's model of virtuous leadership. In Al-Farabi's vision of the virtuous city, the role of the leader is of paramount importance. He develops a comprehensive model of virtuous leadership, arguing that the health and happiness of the society depends entirely on the character and wisdom of its ruler. Al-Farabi's ideal ruler is a synthesis of the Platonic philosopher king and the Islamic prophet. This leader must possess not only profound intellectual and philosophical knowledge, but also exceptional moral and practical virtues. He must have a perfect grasp of the universal principles of being and the divine order, and be able to translate this understanding into concrete, just, and effective laws and policies for the city. Al-Farabi outlined a series of necessary qualifications for the ideal ruler. These included not only wisdom, intelligence, and a love of learning, but also a strong will, a clear sense of justice, a love of truth, and a natural disposition to lead. He believed that this ideal leader would possess the highest level of intellect, capable of receiving knowledge directly from the active intellect, much like a prophet. This intellectual and spiritual perfection would allow the ruler to govern the city with a wisdom that transcends personal interests and societal whims, directing its citizens toward the ultimate good. Al-Farabi's model was a direct response to the political instability and moral decay he witnessed in the world around him. He posited that without such a virtuous and philosophically enlightened leader, a society would inevitably fall into one of the ignorant or wicked states, where its citizens pursue fleeting and false forms of happiness. The role of logic in Al-Farabi's philosophy. For Al-Farabi, logic was far more than an academic exercise. It was the indispensable tool of all philosophical and scientific inquiry, the very foundation of knowledge. As the second teacher, he dedicated a significant portion of his life to studying and commenting on the Aristotelian logical works known as the Organon. His commentaries were instrumental in making Aristotelian logic the standard for rational inquiry in the Islamic world. Al-Farabi meticulously explained the principles of syllogism, deduction, and induction, and he also expanded on Aristotle's work by including rhetoric and poetics within the scope of logic. He viewed logic as a set of rules and procedures that govern the process of correct thinking,
a canon or standard that could be used to distinguish between true and false arguments. He compared logic to a set of scales for weighing intellectual propositions, and a ruler for measuring arguments, ensuring that one's reasoning was sound and free from error. For Al-Farabi, the mastery of logic was the first step on the path to philosophical wisdom. It was the training ground for the intellect, preparing the mind to grasp universal and necessary truths. He believed that without a solid grounding in logic, a philosopher could not hope to achieve certainty in any field, whether it be metaphysics, ethics, or politics. Thus, logic for Al-Farabi was not just a branch of philosophy, but the very instrument that made philosophical inquiry possible.
Philosophy meets prophecy. Al-Farabi's synthesis. Al-Farabi's most innovative and enduring contribution to Islamic thought was his brilliant synthesis of philosophy and prophecy. He faced a dual challenge: to make Greek philosophy intellectually respectable to a religious audience, and to provide a philosophical basis for the central role of prophecy in Islam. His solution was to create a unified system where philosophy and prophecy were seen as two sides of the same coin, both originating from the same divine source. At the heart of his cosmology was the concept of emanation, a Neoplatonic idea that he adapted to an Islamic context. He argued that from the one God emanated a series of intelligences, with the final one being the active intellect. This active intellect, he posited, was the source of all human knowledge and the medium through which God communicates with the terrestrial world. The synthesis occurred when Al-Farabi connected this philosophical model to the Islamic concept of prophecy. He theorized that the prophet was an individual whose intellect and imaginative faculty were so highly perfected that they could receive a direct overflow of knowledge from the active intellect. This overflow of divine knowledge, which the philosopher could only grasp through rigorous intellectual effort, was received by the prophet and translated by his powerful imagination into the vivid, symbolic, and compelling language of revelation. This model was revolutionary because it gave a philosophical explanation for prophecy, integrating it seamlessly into a rational cosmological system. It allowed Al-Farabi to assert that the same truths that a philosopher could painstakingly prove through reason were the very same truths that a prophet could deliver to the masses through revelation. The philosopher king in Islamic thought. Al-Farabi's concept of the philosopher king is a profound adaptation of Plato's ideal ruler to the Islamic political and spiritual context. Plato had argued in The Republic that the ideal city could only be ruled by a philosopher who possessed perfect knowledge of the forms. Al-Farabi embraced this idea, but saw it as having already been realized in the figures of the Prophet Muhammad and the righteous caliphs who followed him. For Al-Farabi, the ideal ruler was not just a political leader, but also a spiritual guide, a figure who combined the highest intellectual and moral virtues. This ruler possessed the wisdom of the philosopher and the imaginative power of the prophet. Al-Farabi's philosopher king was the head of the virtuous city, responsible for guiding its citizens toward their ultimate purpose, true happiness.
He was the lawgiver, the judge, and the spiritual leader, whose governance was based not on personal whim or the pursuit of power, but on a perfect understanding of the divine order and the human good. This leader's role was to create a society where citizens could flourish both intellectually and morally. Al-Farabi's model provided a powerful intellectual justification for a form of governance that was both rational and divinely inspired. And it became a foundational concept in later Islamic political philosophy. It offered a vision of leadership that was both a response to the political realities of his time and a timeless ideal for how a just and prosperous society could be governed.
Al-Farabi on the soul and human perfection. Al-Farabi's philosophical system was fundamentally teleological. It was oriented toward a final purpose. For him, the ultimate purpose of human existence was human perfection, which he defined as the complete actualization of the human soul's rational potential. He drew heavily from both Aristotle and Neoplatonism to construct his own theory of the soul. He conceived of the soul as an incorporeal substance distinct from the body, and possessing a hierarchical structure of faculties. At the lowest level was the nutritive faculty, followed by the sensitive and imaginative faculties, and culminating in the highest faculty, the rational intellect. Human perfection, according to Al-Farabi, was a process of intellectual and moral development. The rational intellect, which is initially a potentiality, must be gradually actualized through the acquisition of knowledge. This process is not a solitary one. It requires the guidance of a teacher and the support of a virtuous society. He distinguished between the theoretical intellect, which seeks universal truths, and the practical intellect, which applies these truths to ethical action and social life. The highest state of human perfection, which Al-Farabi called the acquired intellect, is reached when the rational soul has fully grasped all the intelligible forms and is in a state of permanent union with the active intellect. In this state, the soul achieves a state of blessedness and immortality. For Al-Farabi, this intellectual journey was also a moral one, as the cultivation of virtues and the control of one's passions were necessary steps toward achieving this ultimate state of intellectual and spiritual fulfillment. The harmony of all knowledge, Al-Farabi's vision. Al-Farabi's intellectual project was driven by a powerful vision of the harmony of all knowledge. He believed that all genuine branches of human inquiry, from mathematics and music to logic and metaphysics, were not disparate subjects, but parts of a single, coherent system aimed at understanding the ultimate reality. He was the first to systematically classify the sciences in the Islamic world, creating a hierarchical framework that placed all knowledge within a single, unified structure. In his work, Ihsa al-Ulum, the enumeration of the sciences, he categorized knowledge into logical, mathematical, natural, and political sciences, with metaphysics as the pinnacle of all knowledge. For Al-Farabi, the purpose of this classification was to demonstrate that all knowledge ultimately points to the same truth. He believed that the principles of one science could be used to illuminate another. For example, the logical principles of inference could be applied to theological arguments, and the mathematical principles of harmony could be used to understand the metaphysical order of the cosmos. This vision was a powerful force for intellectual synthesis, allowing scholars to see the connections between different fields and to integrate them into a comprehensive worldview.
This emphasis on the unity of knowledge was a defining feature of the Islamic Golden Age and a core part of Al-Farabi's enduring legacy. His work offered a compelling model for how a civilization could absorb and integrate a vast body of knowledge from diverse sources and transform it into a single, cohesive, and profound intellectual tradition.